Okay. Yeah, so this will be a little bit different to what I've done before because this is going to be a series specific video. We had the first round of the SOR TransAm series on Sunday, and there was a couple of people asking a couple of setup questions in the race and then post race, as well as in the practice sessions. And I thought that, given that my setup transferred pretty well, actually, well, I say setup ethos from the truck series transferred pretty well across to the Xfinity car. And I said to Stephen that I would try and get a video out as and when I could. That was pretty much depending on if I could actually make it through a video while still being able to talk. So first off, some apologies if there is any coughing in the video. I have got a button mapped to mute the mic, but if it happens whilst I'm driving, then I'll obviously not be able to. So accept my apologies for that. Likewise for just generally how my voice is at the moment. But yeah, anyway, basically I just thought I'd go through a couple of what I think are sort of the starting points of getting a decent setup in one of these cars, because there was some questions that people were asking which it's not that they shouldn't be asking them, because, well, they should. I mean, if you have questions, you ask them, right? But it's more that they're things that can be not necessarily easily sort of just told across, but that they, once you know them, you can just sort of you work with them and they are what they are, and you basically leave them as that. And these are things like tape and tire pressures and nose weight and things like that. So yeah, I think the first thing I would say is you do have 3 base setups from iRacing here, but what you should know is that the Watkins Glen and the road setups are identical. Now, that basically means you just pick whichever one of those you want to start from. There is also a Road America set, but if you look at the Road America set, the tyre pressures are 33 psi at the front and 32 at the rear. Now, if you compare that with the Watkins setup, you can see that you have 22 left sides, 23.5 right sides. Now, I ran in the race on Sunday, I ran 25s all round. So, as far as I'm concerned, the best place to start is with regards to either the Watkins or the road setup. I would leave the Road America setup. The other reason I would leave the Road America setup is because I think, just looking at them, bear with me because I very much only glanced over this, I think they're actually pretty much the same aside from those tyre pressures. I'll just have a quick look to make sure that's actually true. Yeah, so they do look pretty similar. I mean, they have the same front and rear springs, I think. I'll just check once more. Very close. I think 650 and 675. Yeah, and 450s at the front. So yeah, they are basically almost identical, apart from the tyre pressures. Now, it's my opinion that the tyre pressures on the Road America set are just way too high. That's from basically when we ran the trucks. In the trucks, I used to run around about 22s, 23s. At the end of the season, I actually started trying to run basically minimums after watching one of David Cater's videos, but I found that I actually wasn't that happy when I was running minimums. And in regards to the Gen 6A car, I also tried that and I wasn't that happy. But I was happy with all the cars around about, basically inside the 20s. I wouldn't go lower than 20 and I wouldn't go higher than 30. In fact, I probably wouldn't go higher than 27, 28. The next thing to say with regards to the tyre pressures is it can be hard trying to find out where you think the pressures should be. And what I mean by this is, basically if the pressures are wrong, the car will handle terribly. And you won't be able to fix it by changing anything else in the car. It will still not handle right. You'll know it won't handle right, but it'll be hard to pin down why. And by why, I mean whether they're too high or too low. Now, when I say whether they're too high or too low, the only way I can tell by driving the car if they're too high or too low is I find that if they're too high, it always feels like I'm basically sliding across the surface of the track. Like I'll turn in for a corner and it won't bite. It'll just really feel like I'm just basically sitting up on top of the track. I'm not actually biting into it. If they're too low, what I find is that not so much in the front, but in the rear, it really feels like the tyres are marshmallows and are massively compressing on exit, and I tend to have a lot of exit oversteer with that. It's kind of hard for me to show you that. I mean, I say that, but it sounds strange, but it is, because if you're just watching it, it's not the same as feeling it when you're driving it. Like, if I show you with them too high, you will literally just see me sliding around the track and basically having understeer entry, oversteer exit, and everything in between. And if I have them too low, you will see oversteer exit, and it basically is it's hard to see, but it's easy to feel, if that makes sense. So what I would say for that is I mean, you really want a starting point, and I would say a decent starting point is probably 24. I ran 25 last week, and I've dabbled a little bit in the setup. I mean, there's some laps that I've ran with a modified version of my Road America setup, and I got to 27.7, and that was with 24s all around. So I would suggest 24s is a reasonable starting point for for Laguna. And so what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to set basically your pressures to that. One thing about the Watkins setup from iRacing is that it is asymmetric. I kind of understand that, because Watkins you're basically turning right the whole time when you're actually doing the cup layout. There's more rights relative to lefts, so because of that the pressures are asymmetric. But really, for the most part, you just put them as equal. So I would suggest putting those to be 24s all round. So with regards to that, that's basically where we're gonna start here. So you're gonna want to move up to 24s. Now, once you've done this, if you then go to the chassis page, what you'll notice that cross weight's 50.1, ride height's not far off, but there's a lot of preload in the bar. Now, well, I say there's a lot. To me, 97 newton meters of preload in a bar is a reasonable amount. I don't really want to use that for a road course, so the easiest way to get rid of that, as far as I'm concerned, is to untick the attach box, and then if you click apply, and you'll see the bars are now out of the car. Cross weight's 49. We've also got too high and too low warnings on these. That's pretty easy to fix. What I would say is, first off, you just want to equalize these out. So if you just look at whatever the number is on the left side and whatever the number is on the right side, just make them the same. So we'll go to 5.438, and then the rear will go to 5.813, and we might as well. Now if you just go a quick run around and check that your toes and cambers and casters are the same, which they are, and now if we look, we'll see the cross weight is exactly 50. The rear truck arm preload is practically 0, and now if we retick the attach box, you'll see that we now have basically 0 preload in the bar. So that's what we want. That's where we want to start. The other thing to note is you're always going to want arm asymmetry at none, because it's a road course. Interestingly, I've actually started running none in the cup car now, which I think realistically is probably wrong, but it's been working alright for setups. Okay, so the other thing I would want to talk about is tape. Now, I have an external display which tells me what my oil and water temperatures are, so I can keep a good eye on it. If you don't have something like that, then it's going to make your life more difficult, unless you can get the cockpit display on your screen so that you can actually see it. See, I can't see the dials in the car with how I have my screen set up, so I can't do that. I have to have the external display. As far as I'm aware, you can get the water up to 265 Fahrenheit and the oil up to 280 Fahrenheit before the gauge starts to blink. Now, when I say blink, I mean the dial face basically will start flashing red, and if at any point that's happening, you're pretty much rolling a dice as to whether your engine's gonna blow at that point. So you don't want either of those gauges to go above that. Now, what I would say with regards to this is that don't worry so much about the water one, because the water one is really it moves around a lot more because radiator sizes, how the cooling works on the car and whatnot. But really, it's the oil you want to worry about, because the water, it'll shoot up and then it'll shoot back down again. And if you're behind someone and it's getting hot, well, you can just duck out for a bit and it'll cool down. The oil doesn't happen. Once the oil is hot, it's rather difficult to cool it back down again. It's not so hard on a road course. Well, I say it's not so hard on a road course. Actually, probably is harder. But I mean, on a big oval, it's you basically you pull out of the draft for a while, and I mean that's absolutely killer at a super speedway. You really don't want to run that much tape that you're in that situation. But for a road course, I mean, it's harder to stop the gauge blinking because, well, that's just kind of how you drive the course. So really, the solution is to just not tape it up as much. Now, with regards to that, it depends on how you drive the car as to how much tape you can actually have on the grill. I mean, I found that at Road America I was running 40% tape and I never got an oil temp above 265. I know that Sam and Sven in the race, they were unable to run 40% tape. They ran 30% tape because in practice, when they were doing race length runs, they were finding that they were getting the oil up to 280 and the gauge was starting to flash. What we discovered this was that I was never using first gear around the track, whereas they were. So what was happening was I wasn't revving the car as hard, so the engine wasn't getting as hot, and they were in first for some corners of the lap and they were revving it really hard, and that's what was building up the temperature, and that's why they were able to run less tape. Sorry, that sounds odd when I say able to run less tape. They were forced to run less tape. So what you really want to do for tape is you really want to do probably about a 10 lap run. A 10 lap run, the temperatures normally start to stabilize for a road course. I mean, if you're running on your own, you could probably do a full length race run and see what it's like, and just basically judge it off that. I mean, start by adjusting in 5% increments. I would honestly start at 40%, but that's what works for me. If you know that you tend to use the lower gears a lot more, I prefer to use the higher gears because I find it helps with reducing wheel spin. But if you do prefer to, if you are someone who uses first gear a lot and you know that you're going to be like that, I would probably try 30% to start. But the other thing that you should bear in mind is that obviously this is pretty much dictated by the track characteristics and how long the straights are. Road America obviously had very long straights, so the amount of tape that we were able to run there was probably less than normal, I would say. So for Laguna, I think 40% is a reasonable starting point, and then just move up and down by 5 depending on what your situation is, and then you can fine tune. Don't get really hung up on this though, because it's not super critical. You want to get the rest of the car right. This will help, don't get me wrong, this will give you more straightaway speed and it will help. And for ovals, I think it's absolutely critical. I run it completely on the edge in ovals. I'll run my tape as high as I can get it without the gauge blinking. I regularly run temperatures of 275 on the oil in the Gen 6 because I want that extra little bit of straightaway speed. But for road courses, it's not as critical, I don't think. So don't worry too much about it. But the main reason I've spent a while talking about this is because there was a post on our forum where someone was saying they were running zero tape because they just didn't know. I mean, that's completely fair, because if you don't know, well, you want to be really safe. But the difference between 0 and 40% tape is definitely going to be noticeable on the straights. So it's worth. I mean, if you got the time to do it, get it reasonably in the ballpark. You certainly don't want it too high, but at the same time, you don't need to be massively conservative with it. So I would say that your first step really is to tape up to 40%. The other thing I would say is, if you just take a look at you've obviously got options for rear end ratio. Now, in my little test runs I was doing, I found that 4.5 is a good place to start. That gets you into fourth for a reasonable time at the end of the front straight. You maybe get away with a 4.57, but then this links back to the tape as well, because obviously the higher the ratio you have, the more you're going to be revving the engine. So just keep that in mind, that you might be forced to run less tape if you have a higher rear end ratio, because you'll be closer to the top end of the gearbox, top end of the rev range of the engine for most of the time. So I would say start with 4.5. Leave everything else the same for now. But what I'll do is I just want to show you something quickly whereby, actually I'm just going to change the brake bias to 67, because that's what I've been running, and I like it at 67, and just to do these test runs. Now I'll just run. I mean, you can see here that I did 127.7 with my setup, so we'll give this a go and we'll see where we get. Now there are a few more things that I'm definitely going to recommend that are changed with regard to the setup, but I just want to give you guys an idea of the time difference between a relatively standard setup, because as far as I'm concerned, tape and rear end ratio are not items that I really consider truly setup, because they just are what they are. Like, you know that you can't get away with running like a 3.0 ratio around here, because you'll just never be in the top gear. Likewise, you know you can't run 100% tape for the race. So I just thought I'd talk about those to begin with, just to basically just head them off, and that'll probably be the last time I actually talk about them. Now, the track itself I actually really don't like. It's one of my least favourite road courses ever, I think. And I just find it really difficult to get into a rhythm here. It's very stop-start. It's not very flowing, I don't think. I mean, you could say that this section is, but I'm not so sure. It's just all right-angled corners. This is tricky through here, by the way. Braking for the first corner is rather difficult. As you can see, I've overshot just a fraction. Now, whilst we're talking about the track itself, and whilst I can't really talk too much about the setup and whatnot, what I would like to say is that the most important thing about driving these cars, well, the two most important things, but they're very much linked together, is firstly, you have to prioritise the drive off the corner. The drive off the corner is absolutely everything, and that's where all the time comes from, in my opinion, on this car, is how early you can get back to the throttle and how straight you can get it out of the turn and without spinning the wheels. Now, that's twofold. One, because obviously spinning the wheels is going to slow you down, and secondly, because spinning the wheels is going to absolutely kill the tyres. So you really want to avoid spinning the wheels, and you also want to avoid sliding the car if you can. Okay, so that's a 28.75. rubbish. It's not really that close to my session best of 27.7, but I mean the car handles okay like this. I don't think it's race winning, but you could get in this and you would be able to drive it, and you wouldn't find it horrible. And it's a second off, but it's not as bad as it seems, if I'm honest with you. And we'll make a few quick changes now, and hopefully we can get it a bit closer. Now, the reason I'm not just basically showing you my setup straight away is twofold, really. First off, I wouldn't actually be really showing you anything. I'd just be showing you a bunch of numbers and saying, well, I think this works, this is nice. And secondly, well, I have worked on it, and I don't really want to necessarily give it away so easily. So that's the other reason, and that's honestly why. But really, what I'm basically telling you through this video is it won't be far off what I run, if I'm honest with you. The only differences I think we're probably going to end up with at the end is probably going to end up with a toe difference, a toe difference, an anti-roll bar size difference, and probably an overall spring rate difference. Everything else is probably going to be basically identical. Okay, so the next thing I would like to talk about basically is ride heights. Now, in the Cup car, you're restricted basically on if the car's hitting the ground or not. But with the Xfinity cars and the trucks, they have finite ride height limit. So if you see, if we keep, I always sort of try and adjust both sides at a time. But that's the other thing I would say. Always keep hitting the apply button, because for some reason you'll find that it doesn't update as fast as other cars. So what we can see here is we can see that 5.5 inches is the ride height limit for this car for the front, and the rear is, I think I've gone too far. Oh no, yeah, okay. So the rear is about, it looks like it's 7.75 or 197 depending on what you're working in. Now, I would recommend starting at this point, because as far as I'm concerned, that's 2.27 inches of rake in the car, which I think's a lot. And also I find generally that what I will do is I will put the front end of the car as low as I can get it without failing the tech inspection, and then I'll just basically tune the rear to suit. I wouldn't normally actually run that much rake in a car, if I'm honest, but it is what it is, and we're forced to it, so we'll just run with it. The other thing I would say with regards to the baseline setup is I think there's a lot of toe in the front. Like, I think 3mm of toe is too much, so I would reduce that down. Just watch these ride heights, because they will move around a bit. So we'll have to go back. We'll have to go slightly higher on that because of the toe. The other thing to make sure is to check your cambers and casters and make sure they've not changed. I tend to like round them to 0.5s before I start doing anything. Okay, so can we get slightly lower? Yeah, okay. So if we start with that, just quickly before I move on to anything else, because it's going to be, we're never going to talk about it again. If you notice on this car, the shock spring rate is 2,000 pounds and the packer is 0. Basically what this means is we are never going to be engaging that shock spring, and I think personally that that's fine for a road course. On an oval, I use the shock springs all the time. I mess with the packers and move things around all the time, but that's because it's a different scenario, and you're really focused on trying to seal the front end off on the ovals and get it so that basically it rides in the right place, both in the entry to the corner, in the middle, and the exit. On road courses, I don't think that we're working to that level of criticality, so I would leave the packers out. If you really want to, you can put the shock spring, well, you can put the shock springs at whatever. You can put them at £500, you can put them at 10, well, I think they can only go up to £5,000, but you can put them at 500 or 5,000. You can see that they're not in effect because the ride height doesn't change when I change the shock spring. So if you look, we got 5.51 with a £500 spring, and then I put a £5,000 spring in, and we still got 5.51. It's never sitting on that spring. It probably is not going to hit that spring, but I always just put them at the £500 anyway, just on the off chance that it would hit them. But I don't think it ever does. Interestingly, we appear to have bar preload, but I'm not sure why. So have a quick look around. I can't see anything that's off. But okay, well, I'll go for a quick drive with it set like this. The one nice thing I find about having defined ride height limits is that it gives you something to go from. In the sense of, with the cup car, you're a little bit lost because you just have if it's on the ground or not, and that's all you're trying to avoid. Whereas with these cars, the amount of times it's realistically going to hit the ground, I mean, I don't expect it to ever hit the ground in a corner. So I'm quite happy just putting it at the minimums. Braked a little bit too late for. I mean, you can hopefully have heard that with the wheel hop I was getting. I won't actually be too surprised if the lap time is either very similar or actually slower, because there's one or two major changes I've still not made to the car yet to bring it basically in line with how I set them up. One thing I think is going to be probably horrible for the race is there's a lot of places to cut the course here and just drag gravel back on, and I think we're going to see that a lot. So I think that's something to watch out for, actually, because as anyone knows who's been in a race with tracks like this, you can drag an absolute ton of gravel on by the end. And it genuinely makes a difference to how the car handles in certain corners. I think the second chicane at Imola was particularly bad for it. Okay, so we're getting pretty close to this 28.0. I actually got a much bigger difference from that than I was expecting, if I'm honest. As far as the balance was, I didn't think it was that different. Your results may vary, but I personally thought it was pretty similar. But I just do that with the ride heights as a matter of course, to basically just get as much as I can from the aero on the car, because the lower you can get that front end to the ground, the more grip you're going to have, basically. Okay, so that's I mean, actually, if you look at that and you look at the wear and everything, that's pretty good. So I'm just going to save over the road setup there. So I would say that we're probably at a good starting point now. Okay, this is probably the last major thing that I'm gonna do, and it's probably gonna make a huge difference. So I'm actually gonna just change a couple of things at once. Now, I personally think that 30 inches of nose weight, well, not nose weight, but the ballast forward by 30 inches in these cars for road is not really what you want. I mean, even on an oval, I don't use that much nose weight in a car. So I did this both in the truck as well as I'm going to do it in this car. I actually run no nose weight at all. I have it as far back as I can get. If you notice, that puts the nose weight at 50.4. So we're basically, well, I say basically, we're almost equal in terms of front and rear. Now, obviously that's going to mess up our ride heights, so we want to reset them. Oh, so close. Come on. Yay, there we go. Okay, yeah, we're close enough on everything else. Now, I shouldn't have really bothered with that actually, because I'm going to make another change as well. Now, if you notice that we've got the 450-pound springs at the front and we've got 675s at the back. Now, that was working when we had a lot of nose weight. So, one thing I found with the truck, and I found it again with this car, is I've found that equalized springs, front and rear, actually works quite well. So I'm just gonna let's go to 700, because that's the next step after 675, and I can't get them in 5s for the front. You'll see how the ride heights and everything have gone a bit screwy. Now that's just because of the spring, the change in spring length, because we've stepped up in stiffness. So if you just set that back, I'm going the wrong way. I think it's probably going to be too much now. Oh no, we're okay. That's definitely going to be too much when I hit apply. Yep. It probably doesn't matter too much to get them absolutely like right on their limits, but as far as I'm concerned, if you can, you might as well. Okay, so now hopefully what that's going to have done is, because obviously by moving the ballast backwards, we're basically inducing more oversteer, because having the ballast really far forward gives us a lot of understeer because there's a big heavy mass at the front of the car. So that's why we've increased the front springs, so that we lose a bit of that bite that we would have. For now, I'm going to leave the anti-roll bar size the same, although I personally would reduce that. I think this is actually an important thing to note with regards to the difference between this car and the truck. The truck had a rear anti-roll bar that we could use to adjust the balance, whereas this doesn't. So we're back to what you have to do with the A car and whatnot for an oval, where you've got to balance it by using the track bar heights and the front bar only, really. So it's worth keeping in mind that you only have the front bar, unless you want to change mainsprings. You only have the front bar and the track bar height to basically change your roll stiffness and how you've got it distributed front to rear. for now, and yeah, they'll probably still drive okay like this. Now, something that is actually worth noting though is just because the front springs are 700 pounds and the rear springs are 700 pounds, that doesn't actually mean that the spring rates are equal front and rear. Yes, the physical springs are the same, but that's not actually what matters. What matters is what the effective rate is at the wheel. Now, what you would have for if you were doing this on an actual physical car in front of you, you'd be able to find out what the motion ratio was and how that changed the effective spring stiffness, and what your actual rates at the wheel were. We don't have that, so it's pretty much pure coincidence that I found that having equal front and rear springs gives a decent balance to the car. So certainly don't take that as equals front and rear springs is a good way to go, because I can basically guarantee you that at the wheel they are not equal. But anyway, we'll go on a test and we'll see. There was one other thing that I'm not focused on yet, and that was the truck arm heights. On my setup I put them at low, but I put them at low out of a matter of just basically habit, really. They can be helpful in tuning the car, but if you look at the tune tip will basically tell you that the higher you have them, the looser it'll be on the entry. Hang on, is that the way around? Right around? No, that's not the right way around. The higher they are, the tighter the car will be on entry, and the looser it'll be on exit, and vice versa, the lower you have them. So I just put them on low because it basically, as far as I'm concerned, it works quite well on low. They are kind of just a set and forget for me, but it's not a big deal to change them if you do want to change them. What you're basically changing is you're changing the anti-squat characteristics of the suspension, which is, you can really use them, especially on ovals. They can be really handy, but really for road you've got enough things that you can change. Now, one of the other main reasons to pull the nose weight back is basically tyre wear. Having all that weight at the front of the car is naturally going to wear and lean on the front tyres more. So I don't really want that. I mean, a little bit of nose weight can be helpful, but certainly I think 30 inches is very extreme. That was a pretty awful turn entry. But I think that's because I was talking at the same time. But I pretty much treat the nose weight as set and forget now. I've ran 0 all the way through the truck series, and I'll probably run 0 all the way through this series. It's a shame that this will actually be probably a poor comparison lap. I'll probably actually be slower here, but I've not had the greatest lap. Yeah, I was 28 too, but personally I still believe that having the nose weight as far back as you can get it is definitely the way to go. But if you notice though, even with the nose weight that far back, the car is still it's looser on exit now, obviously, but it's still got mid-corner push. Okay. You're obviously slower on the second lap, but that's, I mean, you guys know by now that the tires in these things they just die. But if we look at the wear, we can see that we're still getting the right front slightly hotter than the right rear, but the wear is closer to equal. 2 laps is really not a long enough time to, well, 3 if you count the out lap, to really make that judgment completely, but it still gives you an idea. Now, what I will do is I will put that truck arm mount at the bottom because, as I said, that's my preference. Let's just equalize those out again. Why does my spring perch offset seem to be taking forever? There we go. Okay, now we've got 1.4. Yeah, I would probably keep the toe the same. It seems reasonable. Now, I'm going to reduce the bar size. If you notice, we can reduce the bar all the way down to 1 1/4 inches. You can also go all the way up to 2.5. Oh no, you do 2.7. Sorry, yeah, that's the 70 mil, isn't it? Yeah. Now, personally, I found that running the bar at minimum was quite good actually. In the truck, I did the same thing. I ran the exact same bar size, and then I used the rear bar to balance it. Now we don't have that option to do that, but we do have the track bar height. Now, you've obviously got adjustment between 6 and 15 inches on the track bar. For road courses, always make sure that the track bar height is the same on both sides, because you'll get some odd steering effects if it isn't. So just keep that in mind and make sure you do that. The thing to remember about the track bar is, because the track bar height affects the roll center, it doesn't work the same way as an anti-roll bar, but it does change the effective roll stiffness of the back of the car. A higher track bar gives more roll stiffness effectively because of where it moves the roll center up. So if you think about this, you can balance the roll stiffness without touching the mainsprings, by just moving the track bar heights and the front bar. So because the front bar is now 1.25, to balance the roll stiffness back, I'm going to bring the track bar down to I'm going to go to a 7.5, I think. Now, it doesn't change any heights or anything, so there's nothing to really talk about with regards to that. It's a useful adjustment though, and this is how I basically balance it out. But at this point, we really are approaching something that's very similar to what I have. We're actually probably coming towards the close of this video, I think, because at this point there's now not really that much for me to talk about. I've covered the big things. Everything else is really not fine tuning, but I've covered before. I'll make a little note with regards to Cambers, but it's really what I've said before. You're looking to get the inside and the middle edges equal. The outside not as critical, but you also want to look at the wear. You really want to run as minimum camber as you can get away with. but you should obviously not just go to extremes with it. There's absolutely no reason for you to just decide that you're going to run like 5 degrees or something just because, well, you know that tyre longevity isn't a great concern. You should still set it properly. I hate this corner. I absolutely hate it. Downhill braking zone into a hairpin. It's one of the worst corner types possible. You see, because now that we've brought that nose weight back, we're a little bit looser on the exit. But you can see we've also got better rotation because we've now got a smaller front roll bar. Not my best line through there. I think we're going to be almost identical to 28-0. So why could I not have had that line on the previous lap? But yeah, the times may not necessarily show that much of a difference since the change in the nose weight, but I find that this. I'm not gonna bore you guys by doing like a full 10-lap run comparison type thing to show you, but I honestly find that this way is better because you're wearing the tires more equally, so the balance change isn't as severe. I also really just don't think running that much nose weight in the car is the way to go. I mean, if you have the opportunity to get the weight balance as close to 50-50 through an adjustment, as far as I'm concerned, I think you should. But like I say, you can use it. Just don't use huge amounts. Like I would consider using, like, I don't know, if you did want to sort of give yourself a bit more nose weight to stop the backsliding around as much, then you might want like anywhere between 0 and 5 inches forward. But I really wouldn't want to go more than that. I just don't think you need to do it. Okay, so if we just take a quick look at tyres, we can see that he's got 202 and 201 and 194, 192, 199, 199, 191, 196, 196. Now, if you look at the wear, I would say the rear camber is probably about right, 114. Just a quick note, you're not allowed to go more than 19, I don't think. Yeah, if you look, you get a message telling you it's too much. Well, I'll just kick it to 15. The front is you're getting the inside edge a little warmer, so maybe take a touch of front camber down. Obviously that changes your ride heights back. It's also changed my camber back. There we go. So I'm just gonna go down to 3.3. I generally don't like much caster in the car because I find that it masks steering feel with just a lot of steering weight. So I think the minimum you're allowed is you go down to 4 basically. But I run 5. I run 5 in the cup car. actually not got that big of an adjustment range. I think on the Cup car you can go a lot more than that. If you were to adjust caster, I would say adjust it in half-degree increments, because otherwise you'll find it difficult to tell what's going on. I found the back of the car was moving around a bit there, so I'm gonna go up to 800-pound springs just to sort of stiffen everything up again. That's actually the stiffest that you can set the rear on these. You can set the front to be much stiffer, but there's really not a lot of point, because you're not going to gain anything. You can only get the rear to a certain degree. Also, that seems kind of strange. Oh, I have to fully reset them, don't I? Because of the spring change. Okay, that's fair enough. Yep. Yeah, that all looks reasonable. Plus 2/16 toe on the rear. Yeah. You see how you can get more on the left? That's because, again, this is oval chassis, which is wrong, but it's what we got, so it's what we work with. Okay. All right, I'll go out with that, and this will probably be the last run of this. If you guys do have any questions, because I know I have skimmed over a couple of things pretty much in the interest of time, really. Yeah, just either comment them or message me. If you message me on the iRacing forum, or you message me on the Socks Out forum as well, and I'd be happy to answer them. But just remember what I was saying earlier on, in the sense that it's the drive off that's really important. It's the drive off and not cooking the tyres. Those are the things that you are really trying to avoid. Like if the car does start to get sideways, especially under throttle, like I don't care what situation you're in. I don't unless you're like side by side with a guy on a run to the line or something on the last lap. Lift the throttle, because if you don't, you will cook the rears and they just do not come back. Ooh, way too deep into that corner. Oh, it's a shame actually. I was on for a good lap there. If you guys are actually interested in regards to comparing times to this, it's just the default iRacing weather conditions that I'm practicing in here. I find that until I know what the race ones are, that's generally best. I'm hoping that the race ones will be cooler than this though. Because if they're not, by the end of the race, we're going to be sliding around something chronic. Oh, it was still a good lap. I still got 27.7. I mean, there you go, really. I mean, if you... I really was hoping that people would watch the video and that they would actually really learn how to set the car from this. But if you are tight on time or whatever, and you literally just want to copy the setup straight off, then I mean it's on the screen. You can see it. Go for it, really. If it gets you further up the grid and it gets you having more fun, then that's good enough for me, really. That's what the main purpose of this was. It was to get people so that they could figure out where to start from if they were new, or even if you're a prior member who hasn't made your own setups before. It's feel free to take this as a base and go from there. I mean, you can see from that like my fastest is 27.7 with mine that I raced last week and modified slightly, and the one that I've just built here, which, as I say, is very, very close. I mean, looking at it now, it is. I mean, we are really, really almost identical, if I'm honest. There's minute camber differences. I think there's more front toe in this. The springs are exactly the same. The track bar heights I think are the same. The dampers are different, but I mean that's as you can see by the time. So 27.7 with mine, 27.7 with this. So we're not talking major differences here. And I could have actually probably gone faster had I not made that mistake on the back section. And as you can see, we got 185 right front, 185 right rear, 182, 179, 99, 99, 99. I mean, yeah, this is a good place to start from. So yeah, I mean, like I say, if you've got any questions, feel free to ask them. If you literally just want the setup complete, just copy it off here. But I would really advise that you did have a play around with some settings and stuff. Just mainly to see what they do, so that I mean, I do make changes as we move between tracks. Certain things will probably stay the same. I probably won't move the truck arm mounts. I probably won't move away from 800 springs. This is exactly what I ran in the trucks, and it was great in the trucks. It's transferred across great to this car as well. Same for the small anti-roll bar at the front. I tend not to change that bar. If I want to change the roll stiffness, I tend to change the track bar heights rather than that. In the trucks, I would have changed the rear bar, but we don't have that, so it's a shame, really, because changing anti-roll bars front and rear is a better way of doing it than trying to balance a front anti-roll bar with a track bar. But this is what we've got, so we've got to work with it. But yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Yeah, I hope this has helped. So yeah, I'll see you guys next time.